Exodus chapter 24. Now he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar." Now, first of all, I don't know that I got any of those names right except for Moses. I know Moses and Aaron, okay? But the rest of them, well, I may have gotten them right, I may not have. So don't criticize me for that. I'm not one of those super massive scholars. I'm good, but I'm not that good. Alright. Now, you got to keep in mind that they were at the foot of Mount Sinai. And God has been speaking to his people. Okay? And so now he says, alright, he says, I want you to gather I want you, Moses, I want Aaron, and I want these next two guys, and 70 of the elders of Israel. Now, I'm going to interpret this way. I think that number one, they were old people. Number two, I think that they were the firstborn of Israel. And he was gathering 70 of them. Now, 7 is a magic number in the Bible. 7 is the number of completion from what I've been taught. So, he wanted exactly 70. He didn't want 59. He didn't want 62. He wanted 70. Okay? And what he wanted them to do was to start ascending the mountain of Mount Sinai. But they were to worship from afar. Why is that? Okay. First of all, they were to worship God. Okay? God was now going to be their leader. The end. Number two, it is said in the Bible, and you can look this up for yourself, that anybody that looks upon the face of God without Jesus, they die instantly. Boom. You remember the old pagan story, and this is very much a pagan story, about the pagan thing about Medusa, and if you looked upon Medusa's face, you instantly turned to stone? This was worse. You looked upon the face of our God, it was instant death. You just dropped dead right then and there. And you read about something similar to this in the book of Acts. Okay? There was two people, Ananias and Sapphira. They were married. And they were supposed to bring a certain amount of tithes and offerings to the new Christian church. Well, they come up and they give whatever they think is an appropriate tithe. Now here's the problem. They brought this tithe, but it wasn't what they were supposed to bring. And Peter was standing there telling them, hey, look, come clean. If this isn't your real tithe, that's fine, we understand that. But don't stand there and lie to us and say this is what you're supposed to give us, and this isn't. It isn't. And they say, oh, that's all we're supposed to give you. And Peter says, look, if you lie about this, you're going to drop dead right in front of me. You know what? They lied. They dropped dead instantly. You don't lie to God. It doesn't work that way. It was bad enough that they didn't bring their tithe like they were supposed to, but now they were lying about it. God had had enough and killed them. He first killed the wife, and then he killed the husband, I think. It's either one or the other. One came first, and the next one came next. So, yeah. Doesn't matter. Either way, one at a time, they dropped dead. Because of lying about their tithes. Alright. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come near, nor shall the people go up with him. Okay? That meant that when Moses, Aaron, and those 70 elders started ascending up to the mountain, the rest of the Israelites were to follow. Period. The end. Okay? So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do. Okay. So Moses goes to these people and says, okay, this is what the Lord has said, and as long as you abide by them, you'll be okay. And the people were going, yes, we'll do this. And then Moses wrote all the words down. Okay, so why did he write the words down? They just got all the words. Why did he write them down? Okay. Ever played the game telephone? You whisper a secret in one person's ear, and then they whisper the same secret in another person's ear, and so on and so forth. About seventh or eighth person, they get the whole thing all messed up. Yeah. That's why Moses wrote it down. That way there would be no misinterpretation. Let me tell you something. You state the biggest fact in the world, and 50 people will have 50 different interpretations of it. I guarantee it. But if you write it down, it's in concrete stone. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Now I want you to notice something about the law. Every one of these laws had consequences. Why is that? God already knew before he even gave the law out that these people weren't going to obey it. They might obey some parts of it, but none of them was going to obey everything. He knew this before he even gave the law to them. So he said, they go, why did God give the law to these people if he already knew they were going to break it before they even, practically about the time they got it? Because it's what God calls dependence. Human beings cannot follow God's law, but God can follow God's law. Let me clear that up. A human being cannot follow God's law perfectly 24 hours a day. It doesn't work that way, people. Only God inside of you can help you follow God's law. You can't do it, but God inside of you can. That's why you have to have God inside of you, because that's the only way you can follow this law. The law standards are so high that only God himself can follow these laws. And if God is inside of you, then you can. Otherwise you can't. It doesn't work that way. That's why you're dependent on God. That's why he said, receive Jesus. Receive the Holy Spirit. Because the Holy Spirit can follow these laws, Jesus can follow these laws, God can follow these laws, but you can't. That's why I say accept Jesus in your heart, because they know that without the presence of God in your life, you can't follow the law. And the thing is, you have to go back and do it again, and do it again. You have to have a constant infusion of God in your life. If you don't, that's why Jesus said, I am the vine, ye are the branches. Branches draw from the vine. Get the idea? Plants don't last very long out of the ground. If you got them in the ground, they draw from the soil. Likewise, you have to have a constant infusion of this. Without it, you're already sunk. You go with that. It's just like when you're taking medications for an infection. You stop taking the medication, the infection comes back and it gets worse. That's why you have to have this. It's the only way you do it. That's why God says, keep praying. Don't pray once, keep praying. Why? Because you have to have an infusion of this. Dependency on God is the same thing as this. Let me clear this up for you. No human being can stay up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A Eventually you have to sleep. God made it that way, so you'd have to depend on Him. You don't survive very long. You don't survive too many days without water. You don't survive too many days without food. God made it that way, so you'd be dependent on Him. Alright. Then he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings and oxen to the Lord. This was a part of the ratification process of the treaty between God and man. Okay? And Moses took half the blood, and Moses took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient. Notice, God told him the law, Moses wrote down the law, and then Moses read the law to these people. Have you ever been in the military? I'm not kidding you. Have you ever been in the military and the guy says, it gives an order, and the people go, yes, sir. Then the guy says, I can't hear you. And they say, yes, sir. The first time they brush it off their commanding officer. The second time he has their undivided attention. So God wasn't doing this just once or twice. He was doing this 3 times to make sure that he had their undivided attention. And Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, this is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you according to all these words. Let me tell you something. A contract is only as good as the parties that sign it. You know, all those peace accords? They don't sign the peace accords. They're nothing but a bunch of worthless pieces of paper. Well, this was going to be ratified in blood. This was the most binding seal God had thought of for the human race. He didn't tell the people, hey, sign this document. He said, I'm going to sprinkle you blood so you get really understood that this is your contract. The end. Then Moses went up, and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. Now, they probably saw His glory. They didn't really actually see the face of God, because if they had seen the face of God, they would have dropped dead. Even Moses would have dropped dead. As a matter of fact, earlier in the story, you read about how Moses had to hide behind the rocks. And then God allowed Moses to see his hinder parts, because He knew, God knew, that if Moses ever saw His face, Moses would drop dead. He didn't want Moses drop dead. Isn't that nice? God was so sensitive to the needs of His people. He made sure when they ever saw His face, because if they had, they would have dropped dead. Okay. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under His feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone. And it was like the very heavens in its clarity. Okay? Now, what was this sapphire stone? People will debate this for a long time, but it was the color of sapphire. Okay? And it was so shiny that it was crystal clear. How many diamonds have you ever seen that were that crystal clear? But on the nobles of the children of Israel He did not lay His hand. So they saw God, and they ate and drank. Now what that meant was, God did not immediately kill these people once they saw what they saw. Okay? Now the thing was, they probably did not see the front of God. They probably saw his hinder parts. They were probably following him up the mountain. So what God said was, I did not turn around, because had I turned around, you would all be dead. Okay. Then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and be there, and I will give you tablets of stone and the law and the commandments which I have written, that you may teach them. What's the point here? The point is very simple. God did not want to have Moses write these things down, because Moses was a human and could make a mistake. When God writes laws down, there are no mistakes. God was going to write these stones perfectly. Okay? So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua. Joshua always went where Moses went. Okay? And Moses went up to the mountain of God. Okay? Moses and Joshua are going further up the mountain. Everybody else is going to be left behind. And Moses said to the elders, wait here for us until we come back to you. Indeed, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man has a difficulty, let him go to them. Okay? So what they were saying was that if any member of the children of Israel has problems down below, you're to go down there and fix the situation. Then Moses went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain. Why did a cloud cover the mountain? Because God did not want anybody in the nation of Israel at that point to see him, because if they had seen his face, they'd have dropped dead. And God didn't want anybody to drop dead on account they saw his face. Hence the cloud. Now the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called Moses out of the midst of the cloud. The sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. In other words, the biggest light show you've ever seen. So Moses went into the midst of the cloud and went up into the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days and 40 nights. Doesn't that sound familiar? The flood lasted 40 days and 40 nights. Now you have Moses on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Talk about repetitive. All right. There are 2 points you're supposed to draw out of this. Number 1, if you were to look at God the Father in the face for just a 1/10 of a second, you'd drop dead instantly. Another point you're to draw out of this is that God wanted you to meet him. He doesn't want to kill you, but he wants you to meet him. That's why he will usually show you his hinder parts, or he will show you his Son, or he will show you the Holy Spirit, but he will not show himself, because if he ever does, you're dead. But this is the kind of God we're dealing with. God is a personal God. God does want to meet you. He does want to talk to you. His voice won't kill you. His hinder parts won't kill you. But his face will. God wanted to write down the laws because mankind it's all based on interpretation. If man tries to write God's laws, it's all going to be misinterpreted. If God writes the laws, no interpretation. Okay? God doesn't make a mistake. We do, but he doesn't. And later on, you're going to hear about how Moses hewn out 2 new stones. But even though he hewn out those stones, God still wrote the law himself. The reason for that, God doesn't make a mistake. Okay? God is a personable God. And the only way you're going to follow those laws, because God has such a high standard, is that you have to have a constant infusion of God. You see, if God's inside of you, you follow the laws. If God isn't inside of you, you don't follow anything. We will always fall short because we are all humans. But the God that's inside of us causes us to follow the law. And He will scream in your head. Trust me. He'll say, "Don't do this! I can't be with you when you're doing this!" God does those kind of things. It's up to you to listen. And He's not inventing laws to be cruel. He's inventing laws to cause you not to hurt your fellow man. He doesn't want you hurting anybody else. And I know you don't want to hurt anybody else. You want to get along with people. Some people won't get along with you, but you want to get along with people. I understand that. But the only way you're going to get along with everybody else is to have God inside of you. God causes you to get along with others, not yourself. Alright, I will tell you more in my next video, so stay tuned.